Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for those online tuning in by webinar. And this is the 2022-2023 wet season rainfall outlook for the state of Hawaii. And it's pretty appropriate. And this morning we have a cold front going through the state, so it's kind of setting the stage nicely for what I'm about to talk about. But what I'll do here is I'll start off with a summary of this year's dry season, which ran from May through September. And then I'll head into the wet season outlook for October 2022 through April of 2023. So looking back at the summary of the dry season, most areas across the state had near to below average rainfall. And similar to last year, the dry season actually got an early start. So by mid-May, we already had extreme drought, which is D3 category on the U.S. Drought Monitor map, form in Maui County and on the Big Island, and that the drought in Maui County became extreme to exceptional, which is the D3 to D4 category on the drought monitor by August, by early August. And not to be left out, Kauai had extreme drought, or the D3 category, develop in early August, and then Oahu finally developed their extreme drought conditions by mid-August. So in terms of drought impacts, the worst conditions were, of course, in Maui County, since they had exceptional drought over there. And it was mainly in the agriculture sector, mainly for livestock producers, ranch lands that really had a hard time. And that's usually the case with drought in Hawaii, where it really hits the ag sector hard, and the ranchers get hit hard because it's non-irrigated pasture land. But a complicating factor was that, especially in Maui County, where the axis deer really encroached into farmlands, and that's because the poor conditions of the forage outside of the farmlands resulted in the axis deer moving into pastures and competing for feed, for forage that is really intended for livestock, and also deer went on to onto farmlands and ate produce, which really put farmers in a tough situation. Adding to that, the added costs for over the last year or so, it's really put producers in a tough situation. Kona slopes on the Big Island, it's normally their wet season during the summer, but even they had a period of dry conditions, and they, for a short period of time, went into drought, but they've since improved, especially in late September when they picked up some heavy rain events. So looking at our numbers at our 8 key indicator stations, it actually ended up being just the 16th driest dry season, but that's a little deceptive because the worst drought impacts were in areas where we weren't sampling that rainfall. It wasn't part of our key indicator stations. And then if you look at some more specific sites, we actually had record dry conditions over the Ko'olaus in June on Oahu. And then on the Big Island, we had also some record low August rainfall on the windward side of the Big Island. And even in September, several of the sites had their lowest September rainfall since 2010. So it's been quite dry in several spots around the state. So moving forward, the outlook for the wet season, October through next April, the NOAA's Climate Prediction Center has indicated that we've had a La Nina throughout all of 2022, and they're expecting that La Nina to continue into spring of 2023. So looking at the consensus of the climate models, the models favor wetter than average, above average precipitation in the large scale across the region around the Hawaiian Islands. But because of our terrain, that rainfall distribution really depends on how the strength of the La Nina shapes up. So if you have a stronger La Nina event where you have more persistent trade wind conditions, and you end up having wet conditions over the windward slopes, but the leeward areas remain dry. Now, if you have a weaker La Nina, then you have a better chance of having a more widespread rainfall. You have a better chance of rainfall affecting the leeward sections of the state. And so, really right now we're looking at least the early indication is that a weak to moderate event is favored, but again, it's pretty early and a lot can change between now and April. So we'll have to see how it all pans out. So similar, if this sounds familiar, it's very similar condition to last year. This is actually, we're going into potentially our third year in a row of La Nina conditions during the wet season. This has only happened twice before since 1950, so it's a pretty unusual situation. And so unfortunately for areas that are in significant drought right now in Maui County and the Big Island, there's a chance that this drought can actually persist through the coming wet season. There's a better likelihood of drought recovery in the west half of the states of Kauai and Oahu have a better chance of seeing a full recovery from drought conditions. So that's the outlook, and I'll take any questions right now from both from the media folks in the room and any of our participating partners online. So ask away.
Is it okay if I put this up there really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that okay?
That's fine. Thank you.
Go ahead on that.
Okay. Jennifer, we don't need you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, hi. This is Jennifer from the Associated Press. I was hoping you could talk about how climate change is playing a role in Hawaii's weather. And then I just want to clarify, you're Kevin Kodama, right? You speak?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
When I woke up this morning, that's what it was. Yeah. Yeah, I really focus in on what, the coming weeks and months, and within the setting of climate change, that kind of goes beyond what I look at. So I would say that I'm not the expert on climate change and how that our conditions are impacted. So I will say that a lot of our the wet season is really modulated by, at least right now, what's going on with El Nino and La Nina, the ENSO cycle, and so that's pretty much what I'm focusing in on with the outlook and what the climate models are projecting.
Is there a historical precedent for the length and the period of drought that we're seeing on Maui and Big Island? Because it seems that it's something that's persistent for quite some time.
Yeah, if you look back at the last time, in fact, we had a 3-year La Nina, we were in a 4-year drought, actually. So yeah, it's been known to persist. If you recall back in 97, 98, we had a really strong El Nino that started drought conditions. We had statewide drought. And then after that, La Nina quickly developed. So by mid-1998, it flipped around from El Nino to La Nina. And we stayed in drought all the way into, I think, 2002, when we finally recovered. And we had a wet season. So yeah, this happened before.
So you went back to say, how badly is rainfall needed?
Some places are, some of the pastures are just dirt. I mean, it's just in really bad shape. And so it's not just one event that can solve it all. You talk to ranchers and they say, we need multiple events to get the soil moisture, for the water to percolate down and restore the soil moisture. And sometimes, numbers can be deceiving because you can have a really big rain event and the statistics say, hey, you're in good shape. But a lot of that just goes to runoff, goes out to the ocean if it's too much at one time. So really the farmers like more of a slow, steady rain event. Water can percolate down and you have multiple events during the wet season, get your soil moisture back up. So yeah.
The drought on Oahu, was that something that you were expecting this past dry season?
Yeah, we're expecting drier than average conditions. And so think maybe not quite as bad, and is more localized, but still, we heard from ranchers out there, especially out in West Oahu, Makakilo area, that they were hurting for a while. So it hit people on the side. And adding to that, the Board of Water Supply, of course, they're closely monitoring the water situation because of the Red Hill issue. And so it was a big concern for them. We were briefing them. We had special briefings just for Board of Water Supply, just to update them on what the situation is in terms of rainfall. They monitor rainfall too, but they wanted to know the outlook, and so they could plan ahead. And it's all part of our decision support services that we provide to them as a special user, because they wanted to make sure, of course, that they had sufficient water to get through the dry season, and then hopefully we'll get more rainfall during the wet season, and it'd be enough to see them through.
So Kevin, we had a question come in online from Tim Hurley. Can you put a percentage chance of the probability of continued drought in Maui County and the Big Island?
Percentage chance? Oh, no. Sorry.
And then, Michael,
Hi,
you're unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, yeah, great. We had a pretty mild hurricane season this year. Can you just comment on I guess the reasons for that and whether that can change next year, do you think?
Yeah, the hurricane season in the Central Pacific is closely tied to the ENSO cycle, El Nino Southern Oscillation, so El Nino or La Nina neutral. And because we were in La Nina, that favors having a less active tropical cyclone season here in the Central Pacific. Now, if it were El Nino, then it's more tied to a more active tropical cyclone season. So it's similar, a lot of our hurricane season and also our wet season is really closely tied to what the El Nino and La Nina cycle is doing at that time. And you talk about the follow-up to that for next year. It's way too early. Even as up to May, during May of next year, we'll come out with a projection. But prior to that is there's something called the spring predictability barrier. So there's so much uncertainty up until the May-June timeframe that projections prior to that it becomes I guess more prone to error, I guess you could say.
What would you say the factors are that contribute to the persistence of continued La Nina?
Oh, that's beyond my, like, what would cause 3 years in a row. Yeah, it's all in. I don't know the mechanisms involved, but I do know that having 2 years in a row was fairly common, but having 3 years in a row was pretty rare. But the fact that we've had 2 3 year events, especially 2 year events is not. And every 3 to 7 years, there's going to be it's an ongoing cycle between. It's part of the natural cycle that we have going between La Nina to El Nino neutral. You look back at the records, and it's just nothing unusual about that. That's part of the climate cycle.
Something that comes in La Nina is it does seem lately that when we have the rain events, they do seem violent. Like while they are, few and far between, I guess, when they do happen, it's kind of just like, boom, here we go. Here's a big storm. Is that part of what comes in La Nina as well?
Yeah, partly. We can see cut off upper level lows, for instance, and they just make conditions really unstable for intense rainfall. So you look back, for instance, 2012, where we had, at the same time, we had 4 different islands have intense flash flood events. We had a tornado in Kailua, state record hail. It's all part of get these cold, intense upper level lows.
Can you predict what the wettest month will be?
Not with certainty, but if you look by averages, December, January. But I will say that in terms of frequency of flash flood events, March has become the most active in recent times. Before, November used to be the most active month for flash flood events, and number 2 was October. In more recent times, it's kind of shifted where we've had a later start to the wet season, and then January, February, and March, but especially March has become much more active. So you just look back at 2021, we had statewide multiple flash flood events during that month, and so it's just kind of one indicator that, or an example of how much more active March has become.
Thank you.
How quickly can the projections change? Like, what is the degree of variance that you see in the ones that you see there?
I mean, they won't, from month to month, they usually don't flip really hard, but sometimes these events, like you can switch over, like the example I gave going from, El Nino to La Nina, it can be fairly quick, but I think with the improvements in the models in recent years that I think that the trends, you might start trending in a particular direction, but I don't think in December we'll suddenly flip over and say, oh no, El Nino is coming out. Probably see that kind of change. Any other questions? I think I did online.
Your message to the community, like, we have these rain events and just how quickly flooding can get on it.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thanks for that cue. Yeah, any wet season, I mean, whether or not we're projecting a wetter than average wet season or below average, we can have flooding even in a drought. And so, in Hawaii, these events can happen so quickly. You can go from bright sunny skies to thunderstorms within an hour. And so, always be on the lookout. Stay tuned to what our forecast is saying. We're online, also on social media. Tune into the TV news and radio. But always be prepared. Realize that all it takes is, if you have a flooded road, just 1 to 2 feet of fast-flowing water is enough to sweep most vehicles off the road. And especially in Hawaii, where hiking is very popular. If you see a flooded stream, just, it's better to wait it out and don't cross, because our streams go up very quickly in Hawaii, but they also tend to recede fairly quickly. So it's much better to wait it out if you're stuck on the wrong side. Wait it out, wait for conditions to improve, rather than attempt to cross when the stream is flooded. And just be prepared during this time of year for rainy day impacts. So it's going to mess up traffic, especially here on Oahu. So just show a lot of aloha, be patient, and be prepared for even severe weather, hail, strong outflow winds, lightning. We kind of take it for granted that we don't see too much lightning strikes, but it can and does happen. We've had lightning fatalities before. So if there is a thunderstorm out there, best to get indoors and stay safe, and just be on the lookout for rapidly changing conditions.
What you said earlier made me think back to last March, what we saw. Was that a historically wet season? How would you characterize what we saw last?
I can't recall what the rating was, but certainly for the Haleiwa, that was a record high flow, just in Opaiulu. So that just all along, Haula, Honolulu, that area of Koku, that was a big rain event, and it produced record-breaking flow within Opaiulu stream. And so, just even aside from what the statistics show, just it's an indication of how severe our events can be, and even in the very localized areas. So, outside of the North Shore community, it was really not as bad. It was the intense part of the flooding was really focused. So that's how our events can be here in the state. It can be, not raining on one side, but just, incredible impacts on the other side of the mountain. So, you never know, and always stay tuned, always be prepared, always be on your toes during this time. Good. All right, yeah, thanks for coming by. It's been nice to have folks coming back into the office again. And for those of you online, thanks for tuning in, taking time out of your busy schedules, and see you next time. Have a safe wet season.